Good evening. It's our pleasure today to have Mayor Michael O'Connor as our guest speaker. We really doesn't need much introduction because we all know Mayor O'Connor for a while, but for those who are new and don't, the mayor is actually a Frederick native who was born in Frederick and grew up in Frederick. Before becoming mayor in 2017, he served for 8 years as an alderman. Now, the aldermen are the legislative branch of the city of Frederick. The mayor is head of the administrative branch of the city of Frederick and has many responsibilities, such as president of the aldermen. But one of his key responsibilities, which we're very interested in, is he needs to formulate and present the budget for the city for vote by the aldermen. So I know some people here had some budget questions, and he's in charge of making sure those monies are accountable, that they are spent wisely, that they are spent where they're supposed to be, and within the budget. So before we call up Mayor O'Connor to speak with us today, Alan has a few things he'd like to say.
Just procedural things. In the audience, there's no problem. Just raise your hand or shout out that you want to say something. But we have people virtually here also. And I'm asking them to.
We can't hear you guys.
You can't hear me?
No.
Isn't this on?
No.
Or let's make sure it's turned on. I'm on virtually. How about now?
Yes.
Is that good enough?
Yes.
Should I start from the beginning? Anyway, in the audience, please raise your hand or shout out if you have a question. But the people virtually, I'm asking them to.
Now it's
What?
off. Closer.
Pull it up.
Closer.
To the microphone?
Yeah.
This is a voice actuated microphone. They're very irritating. Because the first things you say don't come through. It's only a little later on that they start to come in.
They're not coming through.
Hello, hello. You have to take this into account, Michael. You get the point once.
Alan, can you raise it? Can you raise it?
Please
Make it easier for you to speak.
It's better.
That's better. Some too. All right, back at the beginning. Anyway, the people who are going to watch virtually, I have to talk again. You see, it's voice actuated. Anyway, they have a hand that they can show electronically, and I respond to it and have them unmute so they can be involved in the conversation. And afterwards, I ask that they mute again. This voice actuation is very urgent. Are you taller than I am, Mike?
We'll find out.
It'll come through nicely with this microphone, but this voice actuated one it's a painful one. Anyway, those are just the rules. Maybe you have to open it up.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Michael.
That's kind of flip off. That's a whole other off.
Yeah, you could take it off, and put it on. Put it on your towel. Really close, you're getting close to your mic. You're, that's too loud. Now try talking to think
It's possible that media training I did through them handy. I think what I'm also going to do is try and project. So maybe if the microphone goes out, you'll still be able to hear me okay. I've never been accused of being terribly soft-spoken, so I apologize for that in advance. It's nice to see you all in person. I feel like it's been, 100 years since I had the opportunity to come to this meeting on an annual basis and talk to you. But the last several years, it's been through the Zoom screen, and I have to tell you that it's much nicer to actually be in a room with people and to be able to watch them falling asleep or see their face begin to turn red if they get angry at the things that I say or whatever it is. So it's just a pleasure to be out here with you again, spending some time. I don't have extensive prepared remarks. There were a couple of things that Lisa touched upon that you sort of wanted to hear about. I'm kind of going to leave the time open for you to ask questions for the most part, but there were a couple of things that I wanted to make sure that I touched upon because they're things that you perhaps read about in the newspaper, and I'm likely to have questions about them anyway, so I guess we'll just sort of knock those out before we begin. I appreciated that Lisa provided a little bit of context. You know, even people who've lived here for a long time don't always know how the structure of city government works and what the roles and responsibilities are. We are Maryland's second largest city. We continue to hold that distinction. We're sitting right now at about 80,000 residents, and we've certainly seen some significant growth over the last decade or so. Longer than that, if you go back to when I was growing up in Frederick. It is possible to not go far. You have but go far to go, but not long distance. You can go far, but you don't have to go long distances to do it. I feel like that's kind of the way my life's journey has been. But it's really one of the great honors and an amazingly humbling experience to be able to lead a city as vibrant as the city of Frederick, a city that's changed a lot in my lifetime, the time that I've been here, but I believe in many ways still retains a lot of the charm of the Frederick that I grew up in. I think a lot of that is because of our downtown. We certainly have a really vibrant and well-preserved downtown. The historic preservation we've done has done a lot to keep the city vibrant, and it's spread out from here. A neighborhood like this, for example, didn't exist. These were cornfields, and I'm appreciative when I speak to a group of people who moved into the houses that replaced those cornfields that you're here. For me to be grateful that you're here means that I have to be grateful that some cornfields got turned into houses. It's opened up opportunities for people like you, if you're not from Frederick originally, to come to this community and hopefully find the kind of quality of life that I think we're trying to strive to achieve for everyone who calls Frederick home. Back in 2019, late in 2019, before we knew what coronavirus was or what a pandemic could be, the city adopted its first long-range strategic plan. And that document continues to drive decision-making in the city of Frederick. Virtually no action we take in the city of Frederick gets done without some reference to that strategic plan. And that strategic plan was done with a lot of input from the community, which we appreciated. And it established 6 strategic goals for the city of Frederick: sustainable urban planning, social well-being, safe and vibrant communities, competitive employment, enhanced mobility, and civic engagement. So those are the foundations of a lot of the decisions that we make. And when we bring projects forward, we want them to fit into those buckets. We want to do things that meet those objectives that we laid out when we adopted that plan. Just this past week, it was yesterday, Monday, time flies, very compressed. I and some senior leaders in the city of Frederick were up in New York, pitching the city's creditworthiness to bond rating agencies. Anytime the city is going to go out to borrow money, we meet with the people who make decisions about the creditworthiness of municipal governments and pitch what it is that we're doing as a city and ask them to consider upgrades. The better, just like your personal credit score, the better the city's bond rating is, the more cost effectively we can borrow money. And the city has a bond issue that we're looking to do that will be about $47 million. And that's going to fund projects like the new downtown police headquarters renovation, flood control work that we're doing in a number of areas of the city, largely in response to the heavy rains that we got in 2018 that produced some episodic flooding around the city. Some road projects, Tuscany Drive, realignment of the intersection of Rosemont Avenue and Bachman's Lane. We've got some water and stormwater projects that we're looking to do. Large street restoration project on the east side of the city of Frederick, which is really important for us to meet both our state mandated requirements for how we treat stormwater, but also to ensure that you're taking care of the natural resources that we have become the stewards of. In making that pitch to the bond rating agencies, we already sit at the next to highest tier. So we only have one more step to go to get the best bond rating that municipal governments can get. It's a challenging process to go through. It requires us to compile a large book of financial data that we provide to the rating agencies. But in there, we're able to talk about what's happening in the city of Frederick and make the case for why we think we're a community that's deserving of having a high bond rating and upgrades where it's appropriate. It includes mention some of the projects that we're going out to fund. Make sure that we don't miss anything really important. At our core, what we do every day in the city of Frederick is deliver services, whether that's the most seemingly elemental, like picking up trash or plowing streets if we ever get snow again, to really complicated infrastructure projects like putting stormwater pipes in the ground for storage to make sure that the life, safety, and health of our residents and their property is protected when we get the kinds of storms that are now a bit more frequent as a result of climate change. It's not that we're getting more rain on an annual basis than we've gotten previously, but what we know now is that that rain comes in fewer, more intense, shorter duration events, which our stormwater systems weren't designed for. And so the work that we've done over the last 5 years to move forward on projects in a number of areas, we're at the phase of those projects now where we can borrow the money, because it doesn't make sense for us to borrow the money before we're actually going to spend it. We've reached the point now with the police headquarters project, with these stormwater or stream restoration road projects, where we've got a bid ready to go, or we've got a bid that's coming back, and the time is now to have the money in hand to make those projects work. The headquarters is a good example of that. We've been working on that for a couple of years, but within the next couple of weeks, the crews will be mobilized inside that former state office building down on St. Street to begin that interior demolition and make way for a new and improved police headquarters building. Practically, when the police department moved into their existing headquarters back in the mid-1980s, the building was too small. And for 40 years, they were working out a space that really wasn't worthy of the work that they did every day. This new space is going to more than double the amount of space that we have available. It's going to give them a space that they can also grow into. We can anticipate the growth of the police department for the next 10 to 15 years and know that we're not going to have to make major acquisitions in order to be able to accommodate what they need. And we're really excited about a piece of that project because it's going to involve a first floor community space. So our police department is really invested in notions of data-driven community policing. And by having a space that the community can come into, it can build and build a strong relationship. We've got really strong relationships in this community between the police and neighborhoods, but this is going to open up that opportunity even more by allowing us to host meetings in there and to invite the community to come in. One of the projects that we're particularly proud of is the city's recent selection to the Good Jobs, Great Cities Academy. This is something that's been in the newspaper a little bit, but there's not been a lot of in-depth coverage about this, and so I did want to take an opportunity to sort of talk to you a little about what that's going to mean. The city back in the spring, one of my staff members attended a conference and heard about this opportunity and said we really need to apply. And the turnaround time on it was very quick. We had about a month to get our application in. This was a nationwide competitive opportunity. It was open to all 19,000 cities in the United States that were willing to apply. Our understanding is that several thousand did it, and that Frederick was one of 16 selected for this technical assistance opportunity that marries the work that they're doing at the Federal Department of Labor with the National League of Cities, which is a nationwide advocacy organization that supports the work that is being done in municipal governments all over the country. Our application particularly was focused on the workforce pipeline and the challenges that we know are coming, because there are jobs that are on their way to communities all over this country, and there simply is not a ready workforce to fill those positions. The most recent numbers I heard are 1.6 jobs for every person who wants to work. We've seen substantial declines in the over 55 workforce, largely as a result of the pandemic. And what we've also seen is there's a lot of younger workers post-college as a result of the pandemic are not entering the workforce at the same rate that they did 5 years ago. The other big impact is on women in the workforce, because what we're seeing is the cost of housing, the cost of transportation, and the cost of childcare are all impediments to fully engaging everyone in the workforce that wants to be a part of it. So what this opportunity is going to allow us to do, we've already begun the conversation, is to convene our partners, our public sector partners, our nonprofit partners, and private sector employers to identify the gaps in workforce development and begin to look at how we fill those gaps. And there was a time when I would have found these concepts a little bit depressing, because I wasn't so sure, and I'm still a little bit at times uneasy about how much you want to be talking to middle school kids about careers. Because I don't know what you wanted to do when you were 12 years old or 11 years old. I can tell you I did not want to be the mayor when I was 11 years old. Your ideas about what you want to do change a lot. And so how we talk to middle school students about careers are going to be really important conversations, because I don't think we should be pigeonholing kids too early into jobs. So the conversation has to be on how do we expose students to all of the different opportunities that may be available. There is about $2 trillion of federal spending that's getting ready to be unleashed as a result of the Infrastructure Reinvestment Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Chips and Sciences Act. These are everything from public works projects to build roads and bridges to building new green infrastructure, whether that's plants that manufacture batteries for electric vehicles to solar voltaic panels and cells, the high technology that will be necessary in order to create the green grid of tomorrow. What we know is that the workforce pipeline that we're going to need in 5 to 7 years to begin to fill those jobs as they're happening simply doesn't exist. So we do have to find a way to talk to younger people about opportunities and to help them better connect what they're learning about in school with what those job opportunities are. And so Maryland, through the Blueprint for Education, while the city of Frederick is not directly involved in the funding and organization of public education in the city of Frederick, Frederick County, I can tell you it's something we hear about regularly from the employers that we meet with. It matters a great deal to them that we have a workforce ready community. And so we're looking at this Good Jobs, Great Cities opportunity as a way to strengthen relationships that already exist. We're really fortunate in Frederick County that we've got fantastic working relationships at the municipal, county, and state level. We have a workforce services system in Frederick County government. We've got a fantastic community college at Frederick Community College. Great public school system, K through 12. These groups are all doing what they do, and the city doesn't have much interest in taking over the responsibilities of these other entities. But for us to be able to best position the city to take advantage of job opportunities, growth that can happen as a result of employers looking at Frederick, the employers who are already here, who we know are looking for workers now, it's a great opportunity for us to be a convener of conversations and dialogue and figure out how we can better strengthen these relationships, which can be everything from how do we build this character? How do we create a better opportunity for parents to not have to make decisions about whether or not one or both spouses work or stay home and take care of kids? How do we make sure that we've got a transportation system that's connected to where people live, to where people shop, and to where people work. We have a year with this opportunity to meet with the technical advisors that are being made available to us through DOL and through the National League of Cities. We're going to be in Atlanta next week. We have an opportunity to be a part of additional conversations in the National League of Conferences City Summit that's happening there. We've been invited to present at that conference on what we're doing for our own workforce readiness. The city, to serve those 80,000 residents that call Frederick home, the employee base in the city of Frederick is about 900 full and part-time workers. That's 154 police officers. It's several hundreds, multiple hundreds of people. I don't know those numbers off the top of my head, as well as the number of police department, because I always get asked about authorized force. In public works, everyone who's out taking care of parks, who's operating wastewater and water treatment facilities, who is working in our permitting offices. It's the back of the house operations, our HR, our attorneys, our finance, our budget, economic development. Frederick owns and operates an airport. And so that's a small staff, that's 3 people. But it's an important component of Frederick being what I like to refer to as a full service city. A city that really offers residents lots of different opportunities to grow and expand their opportunities. We're actively working with the Maryland Stadium Authority on renovations to Harry Grove Stadium. We want to get affiliated minor league baseball back to Frederick. Is it the most important thing that we can do as a community? No. Is it a great value add for our residents? It puts us on a unique list of communities that have minor league baseball. And the fact that the state has allocated the funding to make those renovations, and the city doesn't have to provide much more than our own in-house project management to coordinate with the Maryland Stadium Authority and how that works. It's a real opportunity for a win-win for the city. I offered a couple of months back the state of the city. If you didn't get an opportunity to watch the state of the city, I would invite you. I go into a lot more detail on a lot of things that are happening in the community and projects that we're working on. We understand, because of the work that's happening at our Department of Housing and Human Services, how important services to our residents who sit at that ALICE threshold, the asset limited income constrained but employed cohort of our community, how important service delivery is to them. And so we're continuing to work through projects to bring additional affordable housing opportunities to the city of Frederick. How we can work with private developers with low-income housing tax credits, pilot programs, payment in lieu of taxes programs that the city and the county can offer, other incentives that can create affordable housing opportunities. Affordable housing is a bit of a fungible word. It really depends on who's hearing that, what they think. I think in the city, what we've come to understand is that what we have to do is provide housing that can support all income levels and all jobs and all lifestyles in the city of Frederick. It's an audacious task. It is one that communities all over this country are struggling with. No one has solved the affordable housing challenge anywhere. And we know that the upward pressures of home prices, that growth alone isn't enough to offset that. Frederick has become, it's been a while, but it continues to be a very desirable place for people who want to live. And I want to believe that that's because we're largely doing it the right way here. But what I'll always tell groups of people, I know that we are not perfect. We have more people who struggle with food insecurity than we would like. We have more people who are challenged to find housing that they can afford to stay in for the long term. But we're continuing to look at opportunities, ways that we can leverage the resources that we have available. When developers build, if they're not building the moderately priced dwelling units, then we want to use the funds that they're contributing for housing to help create those opportunities. whether that is helping to offset infrastructure costs that the developer might have, or an affordable housing developer, not all developers, affordable housing developers, whether we can use that to help subsidize rents or permanent supportive housing for those who need it. It's a really complex puzzle. Whether the Department of Housing and Human Services is up to the challenge and has laid out a plan for how we can allocate dollars that we've collected to help address in small ways the affordable housing challenges that we face. I will say this about affordable housing, I will say it about crime, I will say it about almost anything that the city has to deal with. We are not going to find the single magic solution to solve any of these problems. What it takes is our ongoing commitment to continue to problem solve in small ways and to find the wins in the housing arena, 10 and 20 units at a time. The Ox Fiber Brush Company, the 520 North Market Street project, the Sinclair Way development between South and Patrick Street, the new affordable housing that's being developed on South Street, the senior apartments that were done at Sharp Square and are happening over in the Carrollton neighborhood. These are projects that are critical to providing housing infrastructure to residents that want to call Frederick home, residents that already live here and may be looking to extend their time in Frederick by finding affordable opportunities as they age, how we help people age in place. It's critically important that we continue to look at the ways that we can address affordable housing in as holistic a way as possible. The last comments that I will make really are about something that I know is pretty important to the folks that live out here, which is traffic. We had the Maryland Department of Transportation in Frederick last Thursday for their annual Transportation Roadshow. This is an opportunity that they do every year. They visit all 24 jurisdictions in the state of Maryland. They talk about the projects that are in the pipeline, and it's an opportunity for us to advocate for the projects that we want to see the state continue to invest time and energy into. We are really happy. From our perspective, it's only about a decade or 20 years later than necessary that there is construction funding in the state's capital program to widen Route 15. That is a project that has long been needed. It's been a top transportation priority for the city and the county for more than a decade. Anybody who tries to go anywhere in Frederick in the middle of the day or any time of day is going to encounter traffic on Route 15, northbound, southbound, rush hour. It doesn't matter. It is a failing road virtually all the time. The construction funding is in the budget. It is scheduled to start in 2026. The design is at about the 30% phase. It has been expedited by the Maryland Department of Transportation, so they understand how important this project is. But widening Route 15 doesn't fix long-term traffic congestion in the city of Frederick. It simply allows us to make a little bit of a dent on traffic congestion that is already here. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't remind everyone who is sitting in traffic, complaining about traffic, you are the traffic. What we want to try and do with the work that we're doing is to create opportunities to get people out of vehicles where possible. So a big piece of our transportation plan is about bicycle and pedestrian improvements throughout the city. How can we make it easier for people to walk and bike to the things that they need? How can we make it easier and have people be comfortable and confident that those bike and walk paths are safe? When you have traffic in high volumes and it's moving at high rates of speed, people may not want to walk and bike because they're scared for their own safety. And I get it. And so it is a constant challenge of our police department working directly alongside our traffic engineers to look at transportation challenges throughout the city and try and figure out what are the best solutions, the best engineered solutions, and the best enforcement solutions to create bikeable, walkable communities that have great livability and offer a high quality of life to residents. So we have as one of the major bike infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure projects, a bridge over Route 26 that will connect the shared use path network that runs down to part of the rails and trails along East Street, ultimately into the county's path network that will run all the way out the Western Maryland Railroad, this Walkersville line that goes out and connect to the county's bike paths. If we can create, we have the North Branch Trail, which heads sort of out Rosemont Avenue north to the Whittier development. If we can create more opportunities for our residents to walk and bike to places they want to go, either because it's a necessity in order to get to a job or to get to commerce, or it will make Frederictonians healthier because they'll feel more comfortable to get out and recreate in ways that are safe, then I think that goes a long way in helping us to create that high quality of life for all residents. Not everybody wants to own a car, not everybody can own a car, so we have to provide those opportunities for residents that live in our community that may choose a different lifestyle, and how we best provide it. So the other transportation project that we know is part of our transportation priorities, but I have to be perfectly honest with you, it is probably much like the Route 15 widening project. Seemingly needed today, but because of the way these projects work, a decade or more before it finds its way into the state's transportation program for funding is addressing the intersection of Route 26 and Monocacy Boulevard. That has become a major east-west thoroughfare. It was designed, quite honestly, to hold the traffic that it now experiences. So again, it's one of those challenges. The road is doing exactly what we expected it to do when we built it, which is move a lot of people from residential areas like Dearborn or Mormons Mill and areas west of Route 15 to employment centers located along Thomas Johnson Drive and here in the Clemson Corner Market Square area and farther out Monocacy Boulevard with Riverside and the annexations that have occurred over there to bring new job, employment, and industrial manufacturing development opportunities to the city of Frederick. So it's the elephant in the room. Yes, there's a lot of building going on in the city of Frederick. There's a lot of new housing being constructed. There's a lot of new employment being constructed. Our goal when we look at all of these is balance. How do we make sure that we maintain the right balance? And I will tell you that relative to our peer cities, because this is one of the things that came out in our conversations with the bond rating agencies, we have about a 65-35 mix of residential to non-residential tax base. That's the assessable tax base of the city of Frederick. Communities our size, it's more 80-20. So from a peer comparison standpoint, we are doing quite well in striving for that balance of adequate employment and non-residential assessable tax base to go along with, you know, the obvious new residential construction that's occurring. And I want to believe it's occurring because people want to live here, because Frederick is a desirable place. The challenge as we look at all of that growth is, are we adequately looking at transportation needs? We have an adequate public facilities ordinance that requires us to look at it. Are we looking at parking needs? Our APFO requires us to look at that. Do we have adequate water and sewer capacity? The answer is yes, we do. And are we addressing the concerns of the county when it comes to the school system? We are constantly in communication to make sure that as we make decisions about growth and development in the city of Frederick, that we're not surprising any of our partners with what it is that we're planning to do. These projects take years to come to fruition. There's ample opportunity, and we take advantage of every one of those to make sure that the county, the school system, the state, whoever needs to know, understands what the city's plans are, and that we can all plan and work together to the greatest extent possible. I will leave it there. That was longer than I wanted to go, but unfortunately, when you wind me up, that's what happens. But I want to leave ample opportunity for questions that you might have. I'm sure that you've got some specific to this area, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Warren Tuckle. I've been a resident aging here since 2005. I appreciate your comments because part of my questions feel exactly what you just went through. And I just have a couple of comments, and I appreciate you filling me in on some of the questions I had. I think one of the major stress to everybody here is the massive traffic congestion on every street, every highway, every parking lot. It's just massive. Undoubtedly, though, is the patient reason for it at this point in time, and for this to ask what happened, there's no end to the excessive amount of new resident construction. Both on East Street, South Street, Montgomery Boulevard, Mill Pond Road, the Frederick Brickyard, as well as several other Frederick locations. I'm sure you're familiar with that. With thousands of new apartments, the condos, the houses, the villas, the single family homes already underway, multi-thousands of new drivers will soon be on a highway. No room for them. The things that we're talking about doing are not going to happen, as you said, for 10 years, are addressing the problems as they currently exist. But once that's done, the problem with all the new construction, we're going to be at the ground zero. So unless we do something about abating the amount of construction and to take into consideration the parameters that we're dealing with, we're going to be at a point where the toilet's going to be overflowing and we can't stop the flow. You have a question? Yes. What does the Frederick Mayor Council and the Planning Board plan to do to solve this problem, both with the construction by slowing them down, by deleting the amount of new building plans until it can be absorbed? And what are we going to do about the highway stuff too? So 2 questions. One about the housing, the impact of that, and the second one is, I think you already addressed it, which is going to take a long time to solve. Thank you.
I wish there was an easy answer to the question, because I think if any one of us could snap our fingers and make all the problems go away tomorrow, we would. I think there's a lot of dynamics that are at work here. I think we went through 2.5, 3 years of sort of pandemic related slowdown. And it feels to me like we never even went away. Things came back seemingly so quickly and so robustly that it is easy to feel overwhelmed by it. The answer to how do you stop or slow it down is a little bit more complicated. Every new development that comes into the city of Frederick is coming in consistent with the plans that have been adopted by not necessarily this mayor and board of aldermen, but all of the previous mayors and boards of aldermen. There's a kind of I'll call sort of legislative consistency to what's been happening in the city of Frederick. The plan and the comp plan that we have today is, largely foundationally the comp plan from 10 years ago, which is foundationally the comp plan from 10 years before that. All of the growth that is occurring, what we're seeing in terms of new residential or new employment growth, all of it is consistent with the adopted plans of the city of Frederick. That infill development, when you see new projects go up in infill areas, that's identified in our comp plan as tier 1. It's the most desirable development that we can get because it is development that is already connected to infrastructure that is in place. So we're not asking a developer to put in new roads or extend new water and sewer infrastructure. Ideally, to not to contribute to schools that have already been constructed and not demand that there be new school construction. It's almost an impossible question to answer because I think to me, let me tell you what I don't think the answer is. I don't think the answer is that we can just turn a switch somewhere and stop things for a period of time. Because all we're gonna do if we do that, we're artificially rigging the game. We're gonna drive housing prices in a direction that we can't control. We're gonna drive real estate generally in a direction that we can't control. It's unpredictable, quite honestly, in terms of the city's budget, because I don't think we know what the outcome of making those changes are. We have within our comp plan, and we have within all of our growth and development documents, the tools at our disposal to address and manage these infrastructure challenges that come with new development. The developers are asked to contribute certain things, and we evaluate every one of these projects based on whether or not they're hitting the mark on the things that we want. The hard part that we can't necessarily control for is that we're a desirable place for people to visit as well. We had something like 2 million visitors close to 2 million visitors to the Frederick County last year. About $500 million in tourism spending. It's not just the people who live here, it's the people that want to visit here. And there is a market, for better or worse, for that new construction that is coming. And again, from a balance perspective, to me, what matters is not just that we're building new residential, but that we're building employment opportunities as well. And we're seeing those come. So if we can be successful in ensuring that as we grow, we're growing on both a residential side as well as an employment side, then with the right transportation connections, with the right alternatives to single occupant vehicle transportation trips, walking, biking, enhanced transit opportunities, people will be able to live and work closer to one another, and that can have a benefit. I don't have the answer to the question that you're asking. All I can tell you is that our growth policies, our comp plans anticipate growth coming to the city of Frederick and take into account, to the greatest extent possible, these impacts as they're being evaluated and come through that planning process. We will listen. These processes are public. The public has an opportunity to come in and talk to the planning commission when new development plans come through. When the city is considering annexations that will come before the Board of Aldermen, the public has an opportunity to participate. That's the civic engagement piece becomes really important. We want to, need to, and have to be as responsive, if not more so, to the residents that already live here than to the residents that want to move here. We also have to be honest and make sure that we don't fix one problem by creating or exacerbating a different problem, which is why the growth conundrum is, I think, always presents such a challenge. In the back. If we can go to the back, and then we'll the other way. Now,
my question has to do with transportation, and you talk about hiking and biking. Well, most of us aren't hiking and biking anymore, and when I see bike lanes are taking away car lanes, so that makes it even worse for this route. The other thing is, you didn't address until you made one remark in response to this question about public transportation. And I think that there's a big lack of public transportation in this area, both in the city and the county, because I work for St. Vincent de Paul. But we have a big problem with people out in the county being able to get into the city. You have to have a car, where people don't always have cars. And I don't see the city doing much in emphasizing public transportation as an alternative.
So a couple of points. Public transportation. I'll address that one first because I'm still formulating the answer to the other piece about the bike lanes. The city, the transit system in Frederick County is operated by Frederick County. So just to make that clear. So that's not that may sound like me saying, don't talk to me, go talk to the county. They're the ones that operate transit. Our transit system right now is fare free. So anybody can get on any of the transit buses and ride without paying a nickel. The intention behind that, and the transit system wants to keep that fare free, is to encourage as many riders as possible. I will tell you that the leadership of transit services in Frederick County, we talk to them on a somewhat regular basis, are oriented towards problem solving. So if the system doesn't run the routes necessary in order to accommodate people where they live and work and need to go, that is a constant conversation to look at how we make sure that a fixed route system is as effective as it can be in delivering services. The county is making an investment in improving transit operations to connect Thurmont, Middletown, Brunswick, Emmitsburg, some of the municipalities out on the edge, to create more transit opportunities through some micro transit opportunities to allow those residents to get into where their jobs or doctors or commerce may reside. So there is also a push. It requires some funding from the federal government in terms of their investment into transit services, because much of the funding that transit uses to operate is pass-through funding that comes from the federal government to the state and to local transit organizations. We have a transportation services advisory committee that takes a look at all of these issues and consults with transit on these services. Is expansion of Sunday service. So, one of the other challenges is if you work on a Sunday, you can't ride transit to get to your job because transit doesn't work. And so that's a hole in the service delivery. So we understand we want as new opportunities present themselves, we want transit stops to be placed. We want the system to be as responsive to the users as it can possibly be. One of the projects that we've been working with on the state to improve headways for transit is a dedicated bus lane on Route 40. So that would take transit buses out of the general travel and give them a dedicated way to move in that corridor, and hopefully ease the transit usability, because those buses wouldn't then have to be zigzagging in and out of the shopping centers. It would be a more streamlined system. That project is in the design phase right now. We've got design funding that we've secured from the state to do that lane. With regards to the bicycle lanes, the city of Frederick has adopted a complete streets policy. And the objective behind the complete streets policy is that no mobility option will be weighed more heavily than another. That if we're going to build a transit system, a transportation system, we need that transportation system to work as effectively for pedestrians, transit, bicyclists, and cars. And we have developed in this country for too long an attachment to single occupancy vehicles as the way to get from place to place. This complete streets policy, and so the addition of bicycle lanes, eventually it seems right now that they're sort of just placed. The city's got a bicycle plan that's available on our website. You can see where the intention is to connect these bicycle lanes to one another, and ultimately to have bicycle lanes in the city connected to the path system that the county is putting together. There is a network plan. But in time, until you create all of those robust opportunities, it's gonna feel like we're taking opportunities for cars away, but the complete streets policy envisions a future where we are less dependent on our automobiles as a primary means of mobility. And I think we also saw during the pandemic, it may be a little bit dreamy and it may seem kind of pie in the sky in terms of that approach. We saw during the pandemic dramatic changes in the way people work, dramatic changes in the way people access services. Everything from I can call and have virtually anything I want to buy delivered to my front porch. I never need to get into a car and go to a store if I don't want to. Not everybody has the wealth and the means to make that happen, but it's an opportunity for a lot of people. We found out during the pandemic that we don't have to get in our car and drive and go see our doctor if we don't want to. Those doctor's appointments are now largely available in, there are remote opportunities for those. Doesn't work for every doctor, doesn't work for every doctor appointment. Certainly hard to see your dentist, you know, if you're not sitting in the chair. I think I would rather see my dermatologist in person than have them looking at, you know, pictures of me on a TV screen. So the pandemic has taught us that there are changes that are coming. We'll adapt to some of those more easily than we do to others. I can tell you that as we look to continue to expand bike lanes, as much as it may feel like we're taking away transportation for single motor vehicles, our traffic engineers are looking at all of these pieces as a system. It's not about bikes alone. It's not about buses alone. It's not about cars. It's about how do all of these mobility options, how does the way we lay out neighborhoods, how does the way we design street grids, how does the way we place employment and commerce and residential near one another. This is all part of a system we're trying to fit together. Much of the system that exists in the city of Frederick was built long before we were ever having these conversations. And that retrofit process is time consuming and is quite honestly expensive, which is why it's happening slowly. But our hope is that in time, it will become as evident in reality as it is on the plans that have been adopted, that we want all of these pieces to work together. But I'll be honest with you, now, today, it's growing pains as we're introducing to people new concepts and new ideas that 20 years ago, nobody was ever talking about.
Voice actually pretty close to your mouth. Closer.
Mayor, good to have you here. What do you think about Alderman getting elected in districts as opposed to ours?
It's interesting. So there's an interesting test case of this, and I think what you're making reference to is the city's charter review that's underway. Direct all the questions to Mr. John Funderburg, who's in that committee. Rockville just did some test votes on that yesterday, and so they did non-binding sort of queries of their voters. They had an election in Rockville yesterday on that very question, and a majority of voters said, yeah, we think district representation would make sense. I would say generally I'm inclined towards that at some point, and the city may be at that point where you're just at a size where it's not realistic to ask people to run for a part-time job and try and reach 80,000 residents in the process of doing that. So I would say I'm probably inclined towards districts. There's a process you've got to go through to get there. Once you create districts, now you create maps, and when you create maps, you create politics, and there's always been politics, but we know the politics of map drawing is more complicated maybe than it needs to be. So there are logistics that would need to be worked out, but sooner as opposed to later, and whether that's in the next election cycle in 2025 or 2029. I think districts are coming because I think it probably makes sense both from a cost perspective for candidates who are running, but I think from a representation perspective as well. The opportunity for residents to feel like they're represented by someone that really understands the unique characteristics of whatever that neighborhood is. You can get to a conversation, is that 5 districts, is it 7 districts? The more districts, the more representatives, the more cost. I don't know that you can completely talk about money when you're talking about the democratic process. There are some costs you just have to bite as a part of, doing those processes, but I'll be really interested. And I've had this conversation with John. We got, I don't know, 17, 18, 19 recommendations that they're looking to finalize at the end of the month. If you've not been following the charter review process, there's information on the city's website. I strongly encourage you to go and look at the recommendations that are being considered. Those recommendations are going to be finalized at the end of November, and then they'll come to the Board of Aldermen, and we, in all likelihood, will have a series of both workshops and public meetings to try and hear more about what the community thinks about the ideas that have been presented. The goal is to streamline a document that has not been comprehensively overhauled in 15 years. And that may not sound like a very long time when you think that the United States Constitution hasn't been comprehensively overhauled since 1789. To me, once every 15 years isn't too often to take a comprehensive look at our governing documents and ask if it's still working for us that we want it to. And I applaud the committee and the work that they've been doing. They've put a lot of time and energy.
Good evening. My name is Fred Stahl, and
Okay, that's good. One aspect of infrastructure, and I think one perhaps that not just here, but many places is relatively less emphasized, is wireless communications. We here in Wormansville in particular have across the board, we have relatively poor wireless reception. And when you consider that many people, many families, many households have only wireless capability, having cut their lines to traditional telephone service, they're dependent on wireless for things like 911. And here in our community, I mean, we're at the point now where we actually have an activity underway to see, just to evaluate the feasibility of getting a tower of our own. In any case, my question is, from a city of Frederick perspective, is the whole question of the wireless infrastructure in the plan, or how is that integrated in with infrastructure planning more generally? Thank you.
It's a great question. I mean, I think, thinking sort of at the highest strategic levels, if we've got residents in neighborhoods that can't adequately connect to the services that are omnipresent in our lives today, whether that's broadband capability or wireless connectivity, that means the city's not working as well as it needs to. These kinds of utilities, historically, the city is not directly involved in. So we're not in the wireless telephone business. We're not in the broadband business. We sort of license those opportunities to the private sector in order to undertake those. So I'd be really curious as to know what you're hearing from the providers of those services, the Verizons and the AT&Ts and the T-Mobiles and the whoever else is out there providing those services, what they're saying about the reliability and quality of the service that they say they can provide to you. Because my goodness, they want to tell me they can provide me everything all the time, every day, everywhere I go. And I think we know that that's just not true. So the city's not historically necessarily played a role in advocating on behalf of that. I'm not sure I know what that looks like, but I'm happy to have a conversation. If it's a regulatory issue, if it's something with the Public Service Commission that does regulate public utilities in the state of Maryland to become more involved or understand what they might say, is it the Attorney General, the Officer of Consumer Protection? If you have certain rights that are maybe not being exercised or exhausted in terms of that, I think the city would want to be an advocate for that. I don't think we benefit if we have residents that are in dead zones. That doesn't work for Frederick, generally speaking.
Yeah, just to follow up on your point. So we've actually had, some communication with the city and with all the people.
You can just call them the city council, because I think that's what, I think that's a recommendation that's probably gonna sail right through.
And you know, who have responded and actually passed some of our questions along to departments. And I'm aware, for example, that the communications department has put out on the city website, has put out a kind of survey questionnaire, if you will, trying to kind of tap into and understand city residents' issues and problems with, you know, wireless and broadband communication kinds of issues. I'm curious as to, you know, if you're aware at this point, if there's been, you know, what the level of feedback has been to this point.
I'll be honest with you, I don't know.
Fair enough.
And so what I will do is I will,
it's a relatively pretty new survey, actually, only within the past couple of months, so.
yeah, well, I'm not sure that. If the survey's been open for a couple of months, then my guess is that we've got data that now will tell us something.
I'm aware of, I'm certainly, you know, personally aware of at least a couple of data points anyway.
I will check with my communications department tomorrow and find out where that stands and the results and what our intention is in terms of how we're going to use that, and we'll provide that back out to Lisa or others in terms of communicating it out to the rest of the day.
That's great, and also just to mention, council members have actually, you know, responded, appreciating our concern, and giving us other information in terms of how, at least where to go to try to approach the problem. We're at least to solve our balloon problems here in Orleans, Maryland.
3 bars.
We're hoping to
Checking
be,
right now.
well, that's not bad.
That's pretty.
2 bars.
Yeah.
AT&T, Verizon. Wow. Okay.
2 bars. We're doing well here. Anyway, you know, we're in the process of trying to get together with you know, one or a couple of private sector cell tower construction companies who work in this area and know how to get this done within the county and the city. To kind of see where we go.
My understanding is the issue there is going to be the companies actually have to want to lease those towers. It doesn't do any good to build a tower.
Exactly.
The companies aren't going to put any of their equipment on the tower. So
Exactly.
Next topic.
Well, thank you very much.
Short follow on to that. We're sitting in low ground and the towers are out on 15 or 26 and aimed up and down the highways. So over on the island, you're lucky to get 1 bar. Until you complain enough that they give you a booster. But that's only for 1 house at a time.
Well, and this was a challenge. So a couple of years ago, of course, we were all hearing sort of about the I forget what they're called now, but it was the whole idea that we would get not cell towers that were way up in the air, but these, it would be much lower to the ground. They would be almost at like street light height, like standard street light height, and the companies would be looking to place many of these within communities and neighborhoods because the idea was to create a more robust last mile grid to homes and really to compete as directly as they could on a broadband level with the wider broadband providers. There was a lot of concern about how that technology was going to look on streets, whether or not residents would be happy to see this level of technology showing up on their streets without a lot of times when you get to the regulated utilities, they want to preempt local government's ability to, you know, look at things like the aesthetics of that. The technology companies have a lot more power sometimes in the halls of Congress and the halls of Athens to be able to get their will. We were actually successful in ensuring that we could continue to apply our planning and zoning rules to those kinds of things as they're being done, but yeah, it's an issue.
I came a little bit late. I don't know if you'd already addressed this, but for all of you here, who lives on Mill Island? Can you raise your hand? Okay, thank you. We have an issue that has come up regarding the secondary bridge for access. I personally have called your office and I never got a response. We've met.
What's your name, sir?
Markle, and I live at Park Place, Mill Island.
Yes.
It's been a continuing issue with the Conservancy here with Worman's Mill and Mill Island residents regarding the cost of maintaining a bridge that will flood in heavy rains. We've contacted fire department, Frederick County Fire Department. We've done some research, we've contacted some attorneys. We've left it up to the Conservancy to try to resolve it. But it's my understanding, and maybe I'm incorrect, that the city would take over. I don't want to call it the swamp. The wetlands, yes. Yes, yes it is. But the city would only take part of it. Why couldn't the city take over all of it and take over the responsibility for the roads and the bridge?
I will have to like refresh my memory on this when I go back to the office about this, because I remember conversations a couple of months back about that, and I felt like our DPW staff and our city attorneys, based on the reading of some of the documents, had provided some communication back with regards to sort of where the city was on this. As I always like to remind people, when people say, why can't the city? You understand that that's you. The city doesn't do anything. It's you do it. And so what I recall is that we have an agreement in place, for better or for worse, that was signed decades ago about what would happen in terms of the transfer of certain infrastructure at certain points within the life cycle of this development. And one of the things that's anticipated when those agreements were reached is that right now there's really only one way on and off the island. This bridge that you're talking about is available to fire and rescue in the event of an emergency, but it's not a route for anyone else to use. It's there so that fire trucks and ambulances, if the one entrance onto the island is blocked, that there is a way for fire trucks and ambulances to get in when necessary, and that when some subsequent phase of development happens to the west, that that will create another avenue, and this road that runs across this, wetlands area will no longer be a necessary piece of infrastructure for emergency services. That is a to be determined date, unfortunately. And until that date is determined, the road is the reliever in the event that a fire truck or an ambulance needs to get into Mill Island and it can't come through. A rebuttal or clarification, whatever. I hope it's not a debate, but it might.
It's not a debate. You mentioned earlier that previous administrations and aldermen have made a pattern of development. Well, I challenge them because Monocacy Boulevard is not wide enough, right in front of our development. You have Walmart with trucks. The road is not wide enough. I'm a former truck driver. I know that road is not wide enough. So the developmental plan was not very well thought out, in my opinion. I'm from Pennsylvania. I don't think we would have done that there, like it's been done. That's just one item. The second item is police presence in our community. There is not enough of it. As I said, I live at the condominium, 914. We have people who are in our parking lot all times of night and sometimes during the day. They litter, there's drug abuse. I'm not sure what's going on. And the police, as I've come to them, have said, do not confront them. Okay, don't confront them. I can't tell them to leave. The police don't tell them to leave when they do a run. That's an issue. I mean, we're all older here. They walk their dogs, right? And at 11 o'clock, there's a car back there, there's 4 or 5 people in it. People have still have to walk their dogs. You call the police, yes, they come, but they don't kick them in. That's a problem. I mean, do we need more police? My question.
The public often tells us when we need more police. We just added 4 officers in the current year's budget. So, you know, it's a constant, and frankly, Frederick is one of the luckier communities in the region in that, this woman has had her hand up this woman has had her hand up for quite some time. We're one of the more fortunate communities in the region, and that when we hire police officers, we get that. We're not seeing the kinds of vacancies in the Frederick Police Department. We have 154 authorized officers in the city right now. We have 154 officers on payroll. So that's a positive. A question about response times and responsiveness when the community calls and has concerns. I've made note of that. I'll have that conversation with my police chief. I think what I would want to
Great job.
so what I would want to understand is, are we talking about public property? Or are we talking about private property?
Private property.
Whose private property?
The condominium.
Does the condominium have cameras? Does the condominium take down license plates?
We were told not to take a photo of anyone who has been in our parking lot.
By the police?
Do not confront them in any.
Do not, confronting them and taking a photo is one thing. Having cameras deployed that would be recording at all times is something different. It is possible to trespass people. What the police can't do is remove someone from private property if the private property owner hasn't, the responsible party in this instance isn't present to say that individual doesn't belong here, you need to remove them.
I've done that.
Okay. Markle? Markle. So, we'll find out.
Thank you.
I'd like to get you a better answer than, you know, I caution our department frequently that,
Your office has been very cooperative.
I think we have to move on.
Yeah.
Another Carolyn question.
No, I have
Remember?
closer. Again, this is another problem in the community as far as, responsibility, for speeding, for stopping and stop signs, for the general, laissez-faire attitude of people's responsibility. I have attended NAC meetings and asked police to come and put up cameras. I've asked them to look for the stop signs. I mean, it took a child being hit for a crosswalk to be put into this community. That crosswalk is still now there, but do you think that people stop? No, you take your life in your hands to cross over Mill Pond, whatever the road is there, Mill Island Parkway, because nobody will stop. People just do not obey the laws here. And when you contact the police department, the answer you get is that this is a low crime area and our police are better used in other areas. And I just do not feel that that's satisfactory.
So one of the objectives of our police chief, when we brought him on board, is to, over time, that we're in the process of building, is to have a dedicated traffic unit. We don't have dedicated traffic officers today. We don't have people whose sole job for their weeks of work is to do nothing but write tickets, to do speed enforcement.
How about even signs with the blinky things? I mean, I travel all over and there are communities that, I mean, look at Christopher Crossing. They have so many speed cameras. They have everything there. We have nothing here.
So I appreciate that very much, because one of the reasons why they have speed cameras and you don't, may have to do with proximity to schools. The state law that allows us to place speed cameras is very restrictive in terms of where
There's no school.
on Christopher's Crossing, they are within a half mile of the school and we couldn't place the camera. That's what the state law says. So I will tell you that I have been advocating for several years now, and we are working both with our municipal association as well as with our local lawmakers to get that law changed. I would like to have, people may not love me for this, I would like to have the automated enforcement authority placed in the hands of local governments, not written by state law. Let me, as the mayor, justify the placement of a speed camera in your neighborhood if you don't like it. Let me, as the mayor, explain to you why I put up a red light camera in your neighborhood when you think it's just a money grab. Let me explain to you, as the mayor, why you don't want a stop sign camera, but I think one would be warranted because it's an opportunity for us to enhance law enforcement capabilities, to increase public safety, and to do it in a way that multiplies the authorized force that we have. It is not a blanket term. It won't, in and of itself, make people behave. But it is a deterrent at some level when people know that if they go too fast or if they run a red light, they might get a ticket in the mail that's worth $45 or $50 or $75. I want that. I want the state to give me that. The state legislature has been reluctant to cede that authority in local governments because they think that we will abuse it. And my view is, if I abuse it, the voters at the next election will have an opportunity to tell. But I would like to have that authority, because I would honestly put speed cameras in many places right now that it's difficult for me to do. And when we get complaints about speeding in neighborhood, and it's the most recurring complaint that we receive.
Mayor, I think it's getting a bit long. Some people may want to leave, but if you're willing to stay, I'm sure people would like to interact with you.
I'm willing to stay because I had this on my calendar until 9 o'clock, but you tell me.
But there are individuals who came on virtually that I did not respond to because you were carrying on very nicely. But if people want to leave, they certainly they can, but
A quick show of hands of who else might have some questions. One.
let's keep going.
Okay, we got.
Across the creek and back onto that creek. And I know when most of these developers have, a lot of them have left wetlands that will be given to the city for parks. But I don't think most of them are not as lucky as we are to have a beautiful thing behind you to be turned over as what we have behind us. And my question is, I know there's lots of people within this community who would love to spend time and or money once that's turned over to make it more beautiful with native plants and so on, sort of like a Friends of the Park. How would we go about that? Is there just contact the parks? Is there a mechanism in place to where that can be done?
There's a policy that's written with how you start a Friends of organization, what's required to make that happen.
We will do
Yeah, so
that.
if you reach out to our Department of Parks and Recreation, they can give you the information you need.
We have the ruins of the house, the Belmont House is there, that's historic. We have, I know that the city has helped them with the grant for stabilization at one time. But we will,
Yeah.
we will do that.
We love our friends of organizations. They're a great value add to the state.
Who's next?
Wayne?
Let's go.
Good, thanks. Mr. Mayor, nice to see you again. Thank you first of all for, and thank you for your help with the project in Cold Lake, with the, Lefty Crane.
You made it easy for us. Speaking of our great friends of organizations. Speaking of friends of organizations, they make it easy to support.
Maybe many of you don't know, but we now have a sculptor in Cold Lake that I get established. For one of the residents of Frederick, it was a famous outdoorsman, fly fisherman, and author.
So if you see a guy standing in Color Lake, don't call the cops.
Right.
He's allowed to be there.
He's there fishing, and it's a very picturesque site, and Mayor had a lot to do with that. Come along, so I know you care about the city, deeply. And appreciate the macro view that you've given us, but I'd like to go back to a micro view here a little bit about the concerns we have within our community here. And I'd like to revisit what Tom was bringing up about the bridge issue. Only to kind of remind you of what the circumstances were with that, and why we remain concerned to this day about how that's going to eventually resolve. Because what we have is a bridge which, contrary to what you said a minute ago, is not commonly thought to be useful for emergency of any kind. In talking with fire chiefs who responded to a house that burned down in front of mine just this past year, not only was he not aware that there was a bridge there, he didn't even know what it was, but he also said he wouldn't drive a truck across the pavement. And more importantly, think about this. On our street, there were no less than 20 fire trucks that responded to that burned down house. And yet they could not save it. It burned to the ground in about half an hour, 45 minutes. The road, the emergency road that we're talking about, has not the capacity to pass 20 trucks across the bridge in the time it took for the house to burn down. It couldn't drive, you couldn't drive them across there safely, fast enough. There are gates at both ends with locks, which are questionable as to whether they can be released in an emergency. And the response that we've heard in discussions, which have gone on for a year, is that, well, we would just drive the trucks straight through them if we had to. But we're not going to take that road, period. Now, I ask you to think about something. What is the likelihood that this Class A, all steel, all cement support in a non-threatened area, frankly? Yes, there is. Transport Creek overflows, never threatens that bridge. We don't live in a hurricane area. We don't where bridges are demolished. We don't live in an earthquake area. And we haven't been have a tornado here, I suppose we could. So we don't have a lot of natural disasters like some places that would threaten a well-built Class A bridge to lanes. So what's the chance that that bridge somehow becomes dysfunctional, and at the same time, because those are two probabilities, that a house goes on fire or someone gets killed that requires that type of response that can't be met. You look like a reasonable man with common sense, right? I don't think you walk around with an umbrella over your head worrying about an asteroid hitting you, all right, or a meteorite. I think because that's an improbability that you can't calculate. I think that if you look at the probabilities that I just mentioned to you, it becomes so improbable that you cannot, in good faith, make city planning or policy over that improbability. So we go back to the bridge, which was mandated to the building back in 2003 when we first came on this mesa. It's not really that. And, he was told he had to have a bridge because there were so many people there, we might have to have an emergency accident, which of course was inadequately built for that purpose, and that's been assessed by several engineers. And so here we are, with a bridge that no one knows who owns it, by the way. The deed has never been transferred. 600 of your residents of the city are about to be assessed several hundreds of dollars for a bridge that you don't own, and a bridge which the city doesn't want to take responsibility for. And yet they mandated it required. Now, the declaration that made this necessary or obligated the residents includes a clause that says this declaration will only be required unless the city vacates the requirement. The city required the bridge, not common sense. I don't think there's, and you correct me if I'm wrong, there's any other resident in the city of Frederick that's being double taxed for the privilege of having a bridge that leads to their community. And I secondly don't think that there is probably another community in the state of Maryland that has a bridge that they're required as an emergency exit. There are many island communities, Gibson Island, various island communities in Baltimore, that have only one bridge. Sanibel Island, where I have a property in Florida, had one bridge, and it was destroyed by hurricane. There is no talk in Florida or in Sanford and in Fort Myers of building a second bridge on the theory that that was necessary in the first place. So no other community that I'm aware of really thinks the way Frederick did when they said somehow there should be two bridges over this spot.
If I could, so I want to make sure that I understand the point that you're making. The point that you're making is that you think the city should essentially say that whatever requirement was adopted however many years ago for that second bridge to go in, the city should now decide that it's no longer necessary. Because we have a well-constructed bridge and we don't really need this backup bridge.
Or at the very least, I think that they should somehow defend the logic of this on a far better basis than they have been able to produce so far.
Yeah, and the only logic that I understand has been applied to date is that there is an agreement that says the bridge belongs to someone.
Right.
That is not the city of Frederick.
It's a builder. And the builder, and this is what really is the unfairness, Mr. Mayor, and I think you're a man of fairness, is that what would you say to the residents or the citizens of your city if to a person, and we're intelligent people, I have lawyers and doctors, various people live on this island, who bought properties. Not one of them was aware that buried in the fine print of the sales contract was this clause that they own a bridge.
Yeah,
There are 4 homes that just sold on this island, which if you interview the buyers.
So the people virtually can understand this.
Thank you. There are 4 people who have just bought homes on this island, the last 4 homes that sold, who have been told about this, who were shocked that they did not know that they're now owners. No, they're not owners. They're responsible for a bridge they don't own. So this was a perpetuated, I believe, quasi-deceptive, at the very least, sales agreement that deferred the cost of this bridge. And who benefited from that, right? On this island, you have an enormous tax base with very valuable homes. We do our part to support your macroeconomics. We do our part by paying high taxes so that you have the ability to do the other things you talk about tonight. And all we have asked is relief on this one single issue, which the city has the ability to do. And I don't believe will in any way harm the wellness of our residents.
And that may be true. While there are other neighborhoods that don't have bridges. I will tell you that as a result of homeowners associations, generally speaking, all over the city of Frederick, there are homeowners in neighborhoods all over this city that are responsible for infrastructure that they're not aware they're responsible for. Whether that is a stormwater management pond, whether that is parking areas, whether that is lights or street lights or roadways, thank you. Which, and they're buried deep within the homeowners association's covenants, and good luck getting your hand on those. You didn't pick up the day you bought the house, because you're gonna have to pay your HOA management company $75 to get a copy of the documents that tells you what you own. So no, I don't have other neighborhoods that have bridges, but I do have other neighborhoods that have other infrastructure that I think they're responsible for and they don't know it. And what I want to evaluate, because I appreciate that you recognize that I'm a fair person. What I don't want to do is create a dangerous precedent that would then have neighborhoods all over the city coming to me saying, well, we don't want to take care of the stormwater management pond we know is going to fail in the next 10 years, and that's going to be a $500,000 expense that we'd have to raise dues on our homeowners in order to make good of it. Is it fair? Is it fair for all of the residents of the city of Frederick to take on the responsibility for a piece of infrastructure that, when it was built, two parties, I want to believe in good faith, agreed to? Now, circumstances change, and I think reasonable people can evaluate after a period of time has gone by and say, is this still the right approach? So that's a conversation that I'm happy to have. That isn't a promise that the city would step away from an arrangement that it made 25 or 30 years ago, without fully understanding what the implications of making that change would be. Because I would not want another neighborhood to come to say, well, you did it for that. And it may not be a bridge, it may be a stormwater management pond, it may be some other piece of infrastructure that is failing, and now they want, we had this in a neighborhood where the homeowners association went bankrupt, and they could no longer afford to take care of the streets that were designed and constructed at less than city standard. Because of an agreement that the city made with the developer said, well, it'll save us money if we do it this way. And the city said, okay, you can save money doing it, but it's going to be your responsibility, and you're going to take care of them, because we can't maintain them. We can't run services on them because they're not constructed to the city standard. And then 20 years went by and the homeowners association went bankrupt. Well, we're picking up the bag and we're carrying it because we have no other choice.
In all fairness, I think that's apples and oranges. What I'm saying to you is that we have a structure which does not serve any practical community purpose for which it was built.
Except at one point, a fire safety person said you need to have this bridge as a backup in case there's a problem.
The precedent for that has never been challenged, or the rationale has never been understood.
And
It's not being used in 23 years. I would ask you one other question. Have you been approached for a remedy to this that would allow state funds to relieve some of the concerns regarding costs in assuming the ownership by the city of the waste management water area and providing subsidy for that? Have you been approached?
I don't know. I don't. If I have been, you maybe are you telling me I have been? Because I may not have been. Some may have been, but I don't know who's.
I think that a state senator did come to you with a plan which would have relieved the burden of the residents and provided money to the city.
I had a conversation with Senator Lewis Young about this. I don't remember all of those details, but I'll go back and review the correspondence that we had. And again, roll.
It might be a compliment.
Yeah.
Just one thing to this, I'll make it short. I don't need a microphone.
The people online need you to use the mic so they can hear you.
Close your mouth out. Remember?
Thank you. The Conservancy, for a few months now, has had a committee engaged with people in the city. So this is being worked on by the Conservancy.
Okay, that's good to know. I appreciate that.
No,
That's helpful. Thank you. I'll follow with my lawyers and my public works people, and we'll see where it stands. Yep.
Gary's got a question.
I know, I got all kinds of questions there.
It's West Virginia. You can wait.
thank you. I
think I have an easy question, just so you can take a break. I already have the answer, I don't need to tell you, I'll just get in contact with you. Snow emergency route, Waterside Drive, is anybody from Waterside Drive? Been there over, quarter of a decade, it's whatever, 26 years. So, when we ever have our third vehicle on Waterside Drive, one of the 15 routes or whatever. Got a good one, no, it's gonna be 3 inches or more. Easy place to pick it out. So, I have a resolution, I'll contact them, I don't wanna keep your time. We're not gonna debate what we can do, is everybody has a 2-car garage on Waterside Drive, I've been there for 26 years. I have now 3 vehicles, 4 technically, but my daughter has one up in Pittsburgh. So anyway, I'll resolve if there's ever gonna be city snow emergency.
Yeah, but it's a great conversation. I'm not sure we're ever gonna get snow again. So it may be a moot point possibly. But yeah, I'm not sure what the issue, I guess the issue is that when we declare a snow emergency and everybody's got their cars, there's no place for the cars to go. Thank you.
No, not safety, and welcome back.
Yeah.
But a permanent clubhouse, that'd be okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We could trade places. You've not stood in exactly this spot, but you know what I'm about, bro.
Yeah, and I'm done with that, and I'm glad you're doing that. But as a former Army officer and county commissioner, I took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. My question to you is, do you support giving non-citizens the right to vote?
I will, in the Charter Review Committee, it's on their list of recommendations. They're gonna finalize those recommendations and send them to the Board of Aldermen here, by the end of the month. What I've said to the committee, to the members of the committee is, when you send recommendations to us, we want to see your justification. Give us a little bit of the explanation as to why you think that is in the absence of that why, I can't evaluate that because I in my own mind can formulate arguments both ways on that particular question. So I'm very interested in what
your answer.
I'm waiting for the committee's recommendations. It may be a moot point, maybe
You have your own thoughts, don't you?
maybe the committee will run. Well, so that was another one of those. So that was one of the test questions yesterday at Rockville. And the vote, when they asked voters in Rockville, should non-US citizens be allowed to vote in Rockville elections? The voters yesterday in Rockville said no, 75 to 25. They said no to citizens voting 75-25. They said no to 16 and 17-year-olds voting about 80-20. And they said yes to districts, 55 to 45, much closer. And they said yes to term limits for their elected officials, limiting them to 3 terms by a margin of, I think, just over 50%. So it's an interesting approach, I think, to take to these kinds of questions would be, maybe we should ask the voters what they think. And Rockville did it in a non-binding way. So their resolutions on their ballot yesterday were sort of test questions. They were trying to gauge the community, and they had an opportunity with an election to do that in a fairly cost-effective way. It's a lot cheaper to just include a few more questions on your ballot than it would be to pay thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to a polling company. To give you something. So kudos to Rockville. I thought it was an interesting way to talk to their community and ask a question about and these are issues that are emerging in a number of communities. What this proposal is, they do it in Tacoma Park, they do it in
11 districts.
There's a number of cities that do it already. Should we do it here? I'm waiting for the recommendations to come from the committee and the justification, and then we'll have that conversation.
Quite honestly, we should explore the possibility of putting this on a ballot
as like just questionnaires or like they do in other occasions and kind of get a pulse of the people.
Yeah. That's why when I was not aware that Rockwell was doing that until I heard it on Tuesday that these, or one Monday, that these questions were on the ballot, so. An interesting approach. I don't know, the committee's gonna have another opportunity to talk about all this before they make their final recommendations. Maybe they'll talk about that as well.
Maybe we should put assault firearms on the ballot also.
Fireworks.
Guns.
I don't know if we can regulate those at the municipal level. I'm happy to regulate almost anything I can at the municipal level. Less so on things that I'm not authorized to regulate.
My question is, totally unrelated to anything we talked about tonight. What is the status of the hotel downtown?
So, that project continues to sort of plow through the water, albeit, at a relatively low speed. Though I will tell you that it has picked up some steam over the last couple of months because we have found receptive ears in Annapolis in the new administration. So we spent 8 years sort of trying to convince the last administration they should be a partner in this project, to no avail. The new administration pretty quickly, I've heard from the lieutenant governor, from the comptroller, from the governor himself, that they're highly supportive of the project. So now the question is, what could state support for this project look like, and how quickly could we see that materialize? We're looking at a timeline now that if we can look at a gap in the financing of that project right now, it's going to be largely funded through the private sector. $70 million private money coming in. So there is hotel tax revenue, some city and county support that's gone into the project, and now the state funding. It puts the project in the $95 million range. We can get that capital financing stack all built. It is within the realm of possibility that we could see groundbreaking within a year or two on that project. So we've not given up on the idea of a downtown hotel. About 200 rooms with about 20,000 square feet of meeting space. It has been a top objective of our major employers. They see it as an opportunity for them to showcase the great work that's being done here, particularly at our national laboratory, Frederick National Lab, and a lot of the biosciences and life sciences, to bring those experts into this community to experience Frederick and to do the work that they do. So we continue to make progress, and we're hopeful that we're going to hear some positive news from our state partners here within, we hope, within a couple of weeks. If all goes, if not, maybe the 2024 General Assembly session will bring good news for us. But I remain highly committed to that project. I think it's an important economic development opportunity for the city.
We have another question.
I think it's an easy way.
They're all easy if you don't care what you say.
That's good. That's good. The contracted composting program that's available in part of the city, with Key City compost.
It's now available all over.
It is available here.
That pilot project has been extended citywide.
That's correct.
So contact Key City Compost.
We will. Now I've heard.
I
tend to agree with what you said about broadening the speed gun rules, but when you say you'd really like to just have the full authority, I cringe a little when I think about parking and how it compares. So over there, a number of us bought new constructed homes, much like the bridge thing, thinking we had extensive amount of available curb parking. And an interesting coincidence, the next week after the last home sold, suddenly restricted parking signage started going up all over our neighborhood. So we've got Palatine Park Circle with almost no parking available, where I thought they had like 5,000 feet of curb parking in my immediate neighborhood. I actually made a choice. This lady that was here was talking about having multiple cars. I gave up on owning a Jaguar as a third car. Because we have 2 car garage and when all that restricted parking happened. I didn't feel good about trying to maintain 3 cars. It is madness to have that much empty curb available.
Yeah, I mean, next to the speeding questions, questions sort of about parking and street access is among the most common ones that we get. And it fits into that sort of same bucket about transportation systems. And I'm pretty sure that our traffic engineering staff has been in communication with residents out there that come to the meetings, and they've sort of explained some of the thought.
They came to see me 8 years ago.
Some of the thought process behind why decisions get made to restrict or not restrict parking. I had this conversation with residents in another neighborhood in the city of Frederick, and the challenge for that neighborhood was it was in the approved plans. And what happened was it was in the approved plans, but the final signs were going to go up until the very end of the development process. And people had gotten used to parking on the streets because there were no signs. And then all of a sudden, the last houses are being built. Now all of a sudden the signs go up. I don't know if this is a similar situation where, the original plats for the neighborhood. And one of the conversations I had when it happened out there, and I think you guys were too far into the process for this to work, is that one, we make that kind of restriction known much sooner to home buyers in the neighborhood. That it's much clearer when you're moving into, particularly one of the first houses into a new neighborhood, that you really do understand in full development, this is what your streets are going to look like. This is the signage that you're going to have. And I think what residents don't like, I don't like it, is surprises. Most people could accommodate to any adjustment if they have notice that it's going to be what they've bought into. And the hard part, and we've heard it in a couple of different occasions here, and my wife is a real estate agent, so I say this with a little bit of reticence. The real estate disclosures are challenging. Most buyers don't read all of the documents that are in front of them. Finding ways to adequately place in the hands of people who are buying real estate everything they probably should know. When you buy these houses, all credit to the developers, they draw very pretty pictures for what you're going to get. Lisa knows this. And time goes by, and did they change their mind? Did they never intend to build a pretty picture? Did economics or circumstances alter what they were envisioning? There has to be a better way for people who make the most expensive, important investment they're probably ever going to make, for most people, to have better information on the front end about what it is that they're buying into. And I think that I'm not going to take the blame on this as a city issue. I think this is a community issue in terms of how we disclose information that really ought to be more readily available to people when they're making these purchases. Because if you do that when you're buying it, you might have still made the same decisions you made, but at least you would have done it eyes wide open from day one and not forced to make a decision 10 years later that you didn't know you were going to have to make. You didn't want a Jaguar. That's an overrated car. Anyone else?
It's almost 9 o'clock. You said 9 o'clock.
That's what my calendar said. If it talk too long, that's another occupational hazard.
They gave up.
If you have any follow-up questions, you have anything, I'm on the city's website. Just reach out, shoot us an email. The gentleman said I didn't respond. I think it's fine. Appreciate it.